have what we need already in our Constitution. We just need to stick to it and follow it, really.
This is Christian Gomez for The New American. You may have heard about an organization called the Convention of States Project, or COS. It was co-founded by an internet privacy attorney named Mark Meckler back in 2013. Their goal is to convince state legislatures to use Article 5 of the U.S. Constitution to apply to Congress to call a convention of the states, ostensibly, quote, limited to proposing amendments to the Constitution of the United States that impose fiscal restraints on the federal government, limit the power and jurisdiction of the federal government, and limit the terms of office for federal officials and members of Congress. That's what their model resolution says. On the surface, this sounds good until you realize that in the 233 plus years since our Constitution was ratified, we've never held such a convention. In fact, all 27 amendments of the Constitution, including the first 10, the Bill of Rights, were all proposed by 2/3 of both houses of Congress before going to the states for ratification. The last and only time in our history we had a convention of the states to amend our framework of government was in 1787 at the Federal Convention in Philadelphia. And we all know how that turned out. Instead of revising the then Articles of Confederation and a federal form of government like the one we had under it, the delegates, acting as the sovereign representatives of we the people, dispensed with the authorizing limited state commissions and instead acted upon the first principles to alter or abolish the federal government and drafted an entirely new constitution, the one we've had for the last 233 plus years, with a more national or centralized form of government than the one that had existed under the Articles of Confederation. When properly followed, the Constitution has served as a blessing. But rather than promoting constitutional enforcement and tools such as nullification as the rightful remedy for the federal government's deviation from the Constitution, the Convention of States Project proposes constitutional amendment via an untried and unpredictable federal constitutional convention, or CONCON, under Article 5. In fact, late last month on February 27, 2023, legislators in the Wyoming House of Representatives debated and voted on a Convention of States-backed resolution applying to Congress for such a convention, Senate Joint Resolution 11. As you can see there on the screen, the first line of the joint resolution reads, "A joint resolution requesting Congress to call a convention for proposing amendments to the United States Constitution." Although the resolution initially passed in the Wyoming Senate, where it was first introduced, the Wyoming House was much more discerning in its evaluation. Here's a 2-minute clip of a state representative discerning the resolution. Let's watch.
Representative Penn.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. So on page 2 of this bill, line 2, it says, whereas the federal government has ceased to operate under a proper interpretation of the Constitution. So why is that the case? Have we allowed a situation where the Constitution isn't being interpreted properly, isn't being followed? The Constitution doesn't allow for this government overreach. The Constitution doesn't allow for a budget to be out of control. It's very specific in what should be allowed to be the taxpayers' money be spent on. And yet we already have this issue. What we need is to enforce our Constitution and its limits on power. And that's how we turn this situation around. It reminds me a little bit of a gal named Dorothy in A Land of Oz, how she went through this whole adventure, you might say, thinking that she needed the wizard to get home when she had the power in her ruby slippers the whole time. We already have the Constitution. That is our ruby slippers. That can get us home. One of our founding fathers said, the true constitutional use of correctional power is to inform and educate the people. That is what needs to happen. We need to make sure that people understand what our Constitution says, and the people will make sure that we uphold it. The people will ensure the term limits and vote the politicians that they don't agree with out of office, if that's what needs to happen. Another of our founding fathers said, neither the wisest constitution nor the wisest laws will secure the liberty and happiness of a people whose manners are universally corrupt. The Constitution is not the problem here. We have other work to do. Calling a constitutional convention is not going to fix the problem. on and against this bill.
And joining us now here on the program is that very legislator, Wyoming State Representative Sarah Penn. Sarah Penn, thank you for joining us today here on the program.
Thank you, Christian. It's wonderful to be here. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you so much. So I guess we already have the red slippers, so to speak. It's the Constitution. All we have to do is enforce it, correct?
So yeah, we have what we need already in our Constitution. We just need to stick to it and follow it, really.
Okay, so when the Convention of States resolution was first introduced in the Wyoming Senate, and then it passed, and it was headed your way in the State House, what were your initial feelings or thoughts about the resolution?
You know, I of course was hopeful that it wouldn't even make it over to the House. I was hoping that that wasn't something that we would have to debate. Honestly, when I was elected, Convention of States was one of those things that I really didn't want to go there because, you know, with Convention of States, I'd been down both roads. I'd been against it, and then I started seeing the information from the Convention of States group, and I attended, or I, you know, was involved in some of their webinars and looking at their information and persuasive. And I thought, oh, okay, well, maybe I'm for this. And then the more I, you know, continue to dig and learn, the more I realized this is not something that we need. And the interesting thing about Convention of States is how they put it out there. They say, if you're truly conservative, all you have to do is just look at who agrees with Convention of States, and there you have your answer. And you know, there are some people who are conservative that support that. And however, I know a lot of people who are solid, staunch conservatives, people who've been very supportive and kind of mentored me over the time, who are very against it. And I lost sleep over Convention of States and where do I go? What do I do? But once again, the more that I just really dug into it and gained the most information I could gain, I just realized this is not something that we need for our country. A few days before this was coming to the floor and we knew that this was coming up, we were going to be debating this, we started getting these emails coming in. You know, we get a lot of emails, but we got a lot of emails from Convention of States. And I started, and I respond to all of my emails, whether you're my constituent or not. I respond to everyone because I think that's important that people are involved. And so I started getting these batch emails, and I thought, okay, these are probably something that my constituents signed, and they all had the same subject line. It said, I'm your constituent and I support COS. And I looked in those and it looked like it was kind of a form letter, but it didn't have my constituents' names. It had their personal emails in the body it had their addresses. So I thought, okay, well, I'm going to respond to these. So I started and interestingly enough, I started getting responses back from my constituents saying, I don't know what this is. I didn't send this email. And what is COS? And
Wow.
that really, and I already knew where I was at, but that for me just really solidified where we're at with this COS business.
So you're saying is that COS sent emails pretending or posing as your constituents when your constituents had no idea that these emails were being sent in their name, and they don't even know what a COS is to begin with.
Yes, it would appear that way. So I started replying to all of the emails that I got from people from COS. And I would say, did you actually write this email? Because I'm getting some that are questionable. And some people would respond to me and say, yes, I did. But because I was questioning people, the next day I actually got an email from COS, and they said, we hear that you're suspicious about some of the emails. And really what this is these are people who are your constituents who over the years may have signed one of our petitions, and we've agreed to email their legislators and let them know where they're at. You know, it was just really interesting because the day after we voted on the floor and we killed that resolution, I had a constituent who's a friend and previously discussed COS, but he said, thank you for voting. And I said, you know, that's interesting you say that because just yesterday I got an email from you asking of it. So, you know, deception definitely is a big part of what we're seeing with COS, unfortunately.
Absolutely. So has COS commented or reached out to you since then to try to, assuage your fears or concerns about about their tactics since the vote occurred, or has COS kind of been silent?
Since the vote, I haven't heard a thing from COS. Prior to that, we got a lot of information from them all through the summer. In fact, as we were them, I got invitations to, different webinars and things. Had a lot of contact with them, and they were very nice. But as soon as the vote occurred, nothing. I haven't heard anything, which is okay.
Yeah, you probably don't want to be hearing much from them again, really.
At this point, no.
So what would you say to other state legislators that are currently still in session or may be in session later this year or even in future years that could be watching this video, and they're in that same conundrum that you were? They've heard both sides of the arguments, both really convincing arguments that they may have heard from both the pro and also against. What would you tell your colleagues in other states on how would you advise them on this topic?
Yeah, well, it's a big topic, and that's one reason why it can be so overwhelming. Is one, it's a heavy topic. It's it's a big deal, but two, you just hear so many persuasive arguments on both sides. And so for me, and I wouldn't consider myself a constitutional scholar, but I know my Constitution. I've taken classes on the Constitution. I've actually read it, which many haven't. But break it down to the basics is what I would say. It comes down to me that, even though I have people that I respect on both sides of the argument, somebody's wrong. Either way you go, somebody's wrong. And if COS is wrong, what might happen? We might lose our Constitution. If this Convention of States thing isn't what they claim it to be, if we have an opportunity for a runaway here, what do we have to risk? We have to risk everything. We have everything to lose. If the other side is wrong, that, maybe continuing on the way that we currently are, what do we lose there? We just kick the can down the road, and, maybe we don't fix things. But if choosing an Article 5 convention is the wrong route, and I truly believe that it is, then we lose our Constitution, and that's just not something that I'm willing to allow. Let's use, as you mentioned, the process of nullification. Let's hold our legislators and our representatives accountable to what we already have, what the Constitution already allows, because it doesn't allow the things that we're seeing happening already, and changing our Constitution is not going to fix that fact.
Absolutely. Convention of States makes the claim that the problem we have in D.C. and Congress is a structural problem rather than a people problem. So hence the need to amend the Constitution. But in reality, the problem isn't the structure. The structure is the one the founders gave us. The problem is those who don't abide by the constitutional precepts given to us by the founding fathers. So rather than having term limits to force bad people and potentially even good people out, like Congressman Massey in the state of Kentucky, one of the constitutionalists, one of the few constitutionalists in the House, what the American people should be doing is putting the pressure on their members of Congress to actually read the Constitution like you have and to actually enforce it, correct?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. It's really very educated on what our Constitution says. It's not difficult. It's not complicated.
Well, okay. Well, Representative Penn, thank you so much for your time here on the program. Of course, we encourage others who are watching to share this interview with others and to encourage your state legislator to likewise read the Constitution and enforce it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I certainly would not want a constitutional convention. I mean, whoa. Who knows what would come out of that?
It isn't the Constitution that's the problem. It is the people who ignore the Constitution.
What we need are just more people that would read the one we have.
It's up to us to hold our elected officials accountable,
who understand the Constitution and are willing to take a stand when necessary.